Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I have to apologize for the controllers in the room. You most probably have seen part of this presentation already before, but that gives me also a very good way to introduce this topic. We cannot cease to repeat the same message again until we are heard. So we're talking about what is the role for the human capital, the so-called fifth pillar of the Single European Sky. Has been institutionalized, if you wish, through the Madrid Declaration. So in 2010, there was a European conference on Single European Sky, and at that moment, actually, the importance of the human in the system was identified and has been somewhat institutionalized, at least by a political recognition, being the so-called fifth pillar, which we prefer to talk about the human capital towards the Single European Sky. It's called human factor or human operator pillar, but I come back why we need to make this distinction. Having made this introduction and forewarned those who have seen maybe this presentation that I'm giving always the same message is also based because of that. We as a controller community need to learn to speak a language which is understood and speak it loudly. Otherwise, there will be other people telling us what is good for us and thinking what is the needs we have. We also need to understand what the lobby groups around us, who are actually the drivers in the system, the airlines, are using as terminology, and also understand their spin. So there's a lot of spin around, and that is also why we then decided from an IFATCA point of view that we would offer what I showed you yesterday, or what you can find on our website, is the global statement on the future of ATM, so that it is the professional talking to the public and not the public explaining to the profession what they think the professional should be doing. So it's a bit complicated sentence, but actually that was one among other of the motivation to create some statement. So why is that? Why was this need identified inside our community? Is because the future of ATM is basically now. So the changes are ongoing every day, and we are working on it. We are trying to imagine. So for example, I'm the coordinator in SESAR, and we work in nearly 67 work packages of SESAR. It's a huge involvement, stretches our limits, because we are doing that all on our free time. We are all volunteers, so we have a job next to it. And we are also, of course, very worried, and there's some sort of more professional issues there, that those organizations who have phased out in the past flight engineer on a flight deck, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but they are now having the money to do the same thing in ATM. And we would like to ensure that some of the hiccups which we have seen in the past from the airline business are not being produced in the ATM world. And also, we have only a limited time now, because the airlines will start to turn away or take on board the ATM business. I think that's also something we're going to see, that if the current states and the current ANSPs are not able to modernize the process, it will be run by somebody else. That's something certainly we might expect. So I have shown to you already what we believe will be the future in ATM. For time purposes, I will not go into the details, and you will find all this very well explained, motivated in the statement on the future of the ATM from IFATCA. For those who are not every day in an ops room, the challenge is this. In the past, we were actually estimating where the current position of the aircraft was, and we were extrapolating where it would be. So that's on your left-hand side. Today, we have a radar, so we know more or less where the aircraft currently is, with 4 to 12 seconds delay, and we estimate where it will be. But the future will be, we will know where it will be, and that will be known to all the actors in the system, and that's what actually the SESAR project and the modernization project are looking for. That we have more integrated data from the flight deck. We use the flight deck, so we use the flight deck as a sensor, not necessarily as an aircraft, but as a sensor to help to update our system, because currently I'm a prisoner of the old system. So that means it works in isolation, it works for me well, but it doesn't necessarily give any of the information I have to my neighbor. So it can be vertical neighbor, means the lower sectors, or my geographical neighbors left to right. And we have too much housekeeping tasks. So I still have to talk to aircraft, which is in nowadays communication possibilities is something very strange. We need to, for those who are working with strips, still update the strip. The HMI needs a lot of time, so we're doing a lot of inputs. And for those who are still writing on paper strips, they do a lot of what we call housekeeping tasks. And we still have to coordinate many times for many aircraft. So if something goes beyond the normal, we actually start to work above what the system has been designed for. To give you an explanation, maybe, for the radio communication, I sometimes come to my physical limit in a sector when I gave figures yesterday when we were talking about 20 to 26 aircraft at any given moment in a sector, in a volume of air. The limit is not necessarily the separation. The limit is not necessarily the volume of air. So we could actually put in more aircraft, but the limit is me and the pilots. Me, I have to speak to everybody, and I have to say, hello, good morning, fly this way, and then hello or goodbye, contact, goodbye, contact. That means the time I'm occupied on the frequency is too much compared to what we're doing. So if we can get rid of some of these housekeeping tasks, that would then also give us the possibility for the future system. And because we have heard yesterday that the system is a little bit obsolete on the ground, and I would agree to that, compared to what is in an airborne platform, in an aircraft, what you have nowadays as technology, we're really antiquated. And you also have to know that some of the computer languages which are still used come from the 60s, and we still engrave some tin plates when you want to change the code. So hard-coded things, where in nowadays technological environment, it's quite a challenging issue. And we also have sometimes what we believe some sort of financial impact is more interesting than to create capacity. So that we see now a little bit the changing environment. So that's good. The presentation moves on without me. So then I continue on that. So on human technology, 3 major points we would like to stress, and we stress it always again. We are not against change. Our job is change. That means every day my job changes. And from a structural point of view, an average ATC unit, air traffic control unit, be it a tower, an approach, or an ACC, has about 30 to 40 changes a year. So that means every week a change. What we, however, had in the past, and that is where this myth came from, that the controllers are resistant to change, what I call the myth, is that we were delivered product which did never, ever meet the promises from before. And therefore, we were opposed to introduce the thing like, so the system were bought, they were brought in, and they actually didn't deliver or didn't live up to the promises which were made by the industry. And the second point is we will continue to have human, if you like it or not, we will have the human in the system for many more years. And for us, it is also very important as a third point, we hope to be able to continue to be the manager of the automation and not the servant of the automation. That is not clear yet. In where we're going, that depends a lot on the technology which will be developed. But we believe the approach to integrate the human into the automation loop is to make him the manager and not the servant. So there is, of course, a thin line. There is also some studies which have been carried out in the past that some has to delimit what is now a servant task, which is not it's not, how to say that? It's not bad to be servant sometime for the automation, but it should not be the prime objective to become a servant. It should be really that we remain the manager of it. This slide, just to illustrate what I've said before with regard to the change issue, we are really not against change. We are basically change used animals, if you wish, in the ATC units. However, we have also identified that nobody has actually worked on change management issue in a proper and, if you may call it, human factor science point of view. So everybody does it, everybody reinvents it, some lessons are being learned, but that would be typically for the fifth pillar, for the human capital pillar, something we have to work, some sort of a compendium or guidance material, how or what to-do list for a navigation service provider or states who want to change something when they introduce new systems. Eurocontrol has produced recommendations which are called so-called human factor case, so why not make it a rule or a recommendation whenever you have to change? You don't only have to do a safety case or a business case, but also you should automatically and naturally do a human factor case or a human capital case, because it doesn't work. We have seen that from other examples. For example, when you see T5 introduction in Heathrow, for some of you who are familiar, they trained everybody, or not everybody, they trained a pilot team, a core team, but on day X, the core team was not there. So, and everything went into shambles. So these are the things we could actually, with a proper change management and some sort of to-do list, introduce. That is missing. So everybody has lists and they invent some, but maybe we could also start to think of introducing that as a feature. The humans, as I said, our job in the system will evolve, but we still will be there. So, and the idea would be actually that we stop to be this artist there, but we become a bit more the manager of a structured system, which sometimes it's not the case. And when I'm talking about the automation before the system where we would like to be the manager, if it are not the servant, it is what we imagine is that there will be a high level of automation required in the future in order to meet the capacity target. But if we are honest to ourselves, there are only very, very few systems nowadays which are completely automated. You will find them throughout Europe only on the level of flight data planning. For the rest, there is no automation in the system. So we are talking about also a concept which people do not understand, that it is not the case. So what we see is a lot of assistance tool, modern assistance tool to the task we are carrying out, but the task is still being carried out by the human, whereas the automated tool would be, it's the machine doing it, what we are having as a task. So that is something we certainly would like to see. I've put that on the good housekeeping. As I explained to you before, there are a lot of tasks we have to do to fed the system, to improve that the system is there, or to have a redundancy. So a paper strip, for example, is only a redundancy nowadays because you have so many gadgets and figures on a screen, but you cannot rely on it. So most of the centers still use the paper strip as a redundancy. But you have to keep the strips updated in order that if it falls, or if the main working tool fails, that you still have your picture. So these are things we certainly, we understand under the automation of human-centered or human-centered automation. Strong points of the humans. We have never actually asked ourselves where we are good. We're extremely bad in monitoring, so that has to be automated. We might be good in decision making. We might be good in flexible situation. That is also something, when we start about human factors in ATM, we should start to highlight what are our strong points. And there is enough literature, there's enough research around from other areas where we know exactly what are the good and bad points of the human. We see also now the skills, for example, on modern aircraft for a crew are starting to change. So instead of being trained on checklist, they are starting now to be trained on what is still working in the aircraft, because there are some sort of black swan events which have happened recently where the pilots were not able to cope with all what comes out of the machine. So we have to start to train that, but that is also something we could maybe on ATM level identify what are our strong points, why are we needed in the system, and work on them. and the rest try to give them out. So a few risks quickly. Currently the system is understaffed. If from an optimum point of view, we are lucky in Europe, at least the traffic went down, so it's okay, it's not an issue, but had the traffic gone up as foreseen, we were still quite heavily understaffed. And we need to involve the human operator, and for that, we need to have a little bit more than the normal ops people. So people who can work in training, in validation, in developing new system, because we are not necessarily convinced that what comes out of SESAR will be what we need. It will be something which industry can produce. There should be something. Yes, this is this slide I always try to show that it is very costly not to integrate the human factor or the human capital into the change management process of a life cycle of a system. So that is very important, but that is just a graph here. Again, I come up with these questions I would like to send to you. I showed them yesterday, so these are all questions which are of course clearly linked to the future role of the human in the system, in particular when we start to talk about automation. So who is deciding on the separation, what if tools, if we delegate the separation, who will be held liable, who looks out of the tower in a remote tower, all these things are questions which are there. There's a lot of prospective work from a legal point of view needed, and already now. So the message here today would be, we would be very happy if you start to work for us and to assist us in being, as us being the system, helping us to get these fancy new things into place. So safety will be the inherent property of the system, delegation of separation, automation of separation. There will be no more sovereign airspace issues. Francis talked about that yesterday in relation with the FABs, and all these things we think we have to start to look into it, and we are asking ourselves if we are ready for that, or if we just not want to continue as before, including our membership as well. Huh? So why change if it works well? So this need of pressure from the outside is something we have also to identify if we are really willing as a community to move, to make this step, and if we are serious about it. That will conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.